time to kick off this event. For you who don't know me, my name is Annika Siegfrieds and I work here at Maria01 as the community manager, so a lot together with our startups. And I'm very pleased to be able to kick off this event today, where we're able to launch our 6th impact report from this community. And thank you. Yes, let's give that an applause. But it's not actually me who's gonna present the results and the report itself. So without further ado, I would want to welcome our CEO, Sarita Runeberg, on stage.
All right. Thank you, Annika, and really, really great to see so many of you here. Amazing. My name is Sarita. I started here as the CEO last October, so quite new in Maria still as well, but quite familiar with the Finnish startup scene. So I've been working with startups for over a decade at least already. But now in this context, here at Maria, like one of the things that we've wanted to do for these 6 times already is to showcase the impact that our community has to the world around us. So for a long time, like startup ecosystem was like quite a sort of a inward facing, in the sense that it was not maybe always so kind of familiar to people who are not so close to startups, that what's happening here. And therefore we're trying to make this more visible with these impact reports and actually show that what are all the cool things that we are doing here, because there's plenty of cool things that we do here. I promise you that. And of course now, as we live in these turbulent times, so we all know that last year, for example, wasn't exactly easy, but I'm hoping that we're able to then still kind of shed a bit of light into this economic situation as well. So of course, challenges have been faced and it hasn't been so easy for the startups, but for sure, some good things here as well. But let's get started. So first of all, sharing you this sort of an overall view on what our kind of year has looked like last year. So one thing to notice here is the amount of companies. So the company total number, of course, refers to not only the startups here, but also the investors, our partners, our ecosystem organizations. But what's really relevant here, and what I think it's good to point out, is that even though these times and the last year has been quite difficult, economically speaking, Maria has always been full. So we still have the situation that even though we know that in Helsinki as well, there's plenty of real estate free right now, and plenty of companies needing to scale down their offices and so forth. But here at Maria, we're in the situation that there's still a long queue to become a Maria member, which I think is fantastic, because it really tells that this community that we've built here is really the reason why many companies want to come here and find meaning and find value in here and are able to grow their businesses here. As I was saying, as we are quite full, physically speaking, in these spaces, so therefore the amount of people, for example, and the amount of startups that we have has actually stayed relatively same. So we have about 1,500 people, 1,446 to be precise, and 185 startups. I think that's the record number of all, and that's mostly because we've had a lot of smaller startups joining last year as well. So this is, of course, something that is quite interesting. We look at a sort of a certain segment in the ecosystem, but something that I'm planning on asking the panelists later as well, that how do they see this? That do we actually have a situation where there's actually a lot more new startups being founded? Because to us, it looks like that we've been having a lot more applications from smaller startups. So whether that then means that we actually have a lot more startups being founded in Finland now, of course, there's plenty of talent on the market. There's been bigger layoffs in big tech companies as well. So plenty of people who are maybe thinking of starting their own companies. Maybe it's that, or maybe it's then the thing that in these times, also the smaller companies find it even more relevant to be part of a community like Maria, where you can actually get the kind of support to scale and build your companies. We're very international, as you all know. So here we have for sure several different nationalities present today as well. but here at Maria in general, so for example, for us, English is always the only official language, and that is because we have, at this time, for example, 42 nationalities here. That has been ranging between 30 and 60, depending on the certain time always, but now the latest number was 42. But quite a lot of international presence here as well. And then as an example that you guys are all here, so we are also doing a lot of events in these buildings. So 20,000 square meters of space actually holds quite a few event spaces as well. And therefore, there's a lot of stuff happening on our campus all the time. So last year, almost 400 events were organized here. So you can imagine how many events that is then per week. All right. But then, looking at the industries, and I know this might be super small right now, but you all have the QR codes there in front of you, so you can also then access the report and zoom that yourselves. But basically, this is to show kind of what kind of companies do we have here. So one of the things that we've valued since the beginning has been that we have been industry agnostic. We have different kinds of industries. Of course, our spaces limit this somewhat. We don't, for example, have lab spaces, so therefore we don't have companies here that would need those kinds of spaces, unless they want to have their offices here and then the lab somewhere else. But mostly our companies are focusing on software, different kinds of technological services. So therefore, SaaS, enterprise software in general is our biggest industry here. But some of the things that I wanted to highlight from this graph is that two areas where we've seen major growth during last year is, of course, AI. I mean, that goes without saying. A lot more AI companies also here at Maria. Their share of all of our companies has increased significantly. But then also e-com and online marketplaces is the other one that has grown significantly. That is maybe not so evident as the AI. Of course, everybody knows the AI buzz. But for the e-com side as well, I think it's because there's been a lot more kind of also applications of the AI to the e-com world, and also different kinds of ways to make people's life easier in terms of online purchasing. So maybe it's that. But as you see, there's plenty of different industries present in here. And that's, of course, also something that we try to follow quite closely with my team, that what sort of industries do we have here? What sort of help can we as the Maria team provide to all these companies? And what sort of connections, what sort of introductions to different investors, and how are we able to then help them to find those meaningful connections and the partnerships as well? All right, but then going to the numbers in terms of how kind of big are the operations here. So when it comes to people who've been working in the Maria startups, that's actually something that sometimes still surprises people when I speak to people who are not kind of insiders in the startup ecosystem. So in many of those cases, people are very surprised that's actually really a lot of people, really large activities, really big, meaningful things that you are doing here. So overall, during the whole time that we've been existing since 2016, we've had almost 10,000 people working in the startups that have been here and have then afterwards graduated from here as our alumni. So much of these numbers are also following up the alumni that have already left Maria, because then we still feel that kind of they are very much part of our journey still, and many of our alumni are very active in the community still today as well. So 10,000 people is not actually a very small number anymore. It's a very, very significant part of kind of this entrepreneurship and kind of also expanding the economy, not only in Helsinki, but also nationwide and then internationally. And when we talk about then the salaries, 466 million in all these years is actually also quite a significant number. And looking into the numbers, so if you're able to see this far, so you'll see that 2023 is still missing. So when it comes to these numbers, as not all the companies have finished their books for last year yet, so therefore for our impact reports, traditionally these numbers are lagging a year behind. So these are only up until 2022. So I'm actually pretty sure that we're well over those numbers already if we would take last year also into account. But that will then need to wait a bit longer for. So then to the amount of the applications. So how our membership works here is that, as I was saying, we're not able to take every single company in that would like to. We also like to have a certain criteria for the memberships, simply because we feel that in this community, this works in the best possible way if we have kind of the best matching companies here. And so last year we had a record amount of applications. We had 177 applications altogether. So 177 companies wanting to join our community. And out of those companies, a bit over 40% actually got accepted. In some years this has been lower, some years higher, but it's still kind of quite a strong number for us to show that there's plenty of room, plenty of need for this kind of a community and the kind of the services and the togetherness that we provide here. And this, of course, then means as well that there's plenty of companies that didn't make it here yet, but then we have a lot of partners with whom we then try to help those companies also find their place and then also find their new homes as well. Then looking into the funding. Funding is, of course, something that we work very closely with every single day here. So we have a very large amount of investors here. I would say most of Finland's early stage investors are either physically present with their offices here at Maria, or then they are in our investor network as well. So following Maria very closely. So if we look at the whole existence of Maria again, since 2016, our companies here have raised over 917 million euros. And this is something that we are, especially this year, following very closely during the year as well, because looking at the numbers, we already know that this year will go over 1 billion euros in terms of funding. And that's a big milestone for us in the sense that then we can also then really showcase that in this community, our companies have been able to reach kind of that big milestone. And so last year, of course, was a bit more difficult. Like you see, we've been really on the hockey stick for many, many years. But then last year, there was a bit of a dip. Hopefully, then that's something that we can fix this year as well. And definitely something that we'll talk about more in the panel discussion as well. But overall, there's a lot of funding rounds happening here. Like you see, 403 rounds all time. Of course, as we have many very early stage companies here, so not all the rounds are, of course, that big, but we have had also quite big ones, especially amongst the alumni that we are following and taking into account here. So as we don't have any unicorns here yet, we are still following them. Kind of the alumni as well very, very closely, but Swappy, of course, is the biggest one in terms of funding rounds as well. So Swappy, 169 million euros all together, like kind of summed up all the funding rounds that they've had over those 4 rounds. That's the highest one that we've had. But then several other ones as well, like AI Motive, Merry Health, Linear, and Carboculture. Those are our top 5 in terms of all the funding rounds. And as said, this year will be very, very exciting. So you'll definitely hear from us then as soon as we go over that 1 billion mark. In terms of revenue, we actually already went over that 1 billion mark. So we're also looking into the revenue that our companies are generating collectively here. And this again as well is the 2022 number. And then here, this one now went over the billion euros altogether. Again, like you see already in 2022, we saw that there was a slight decrease. I am expecting that for 2023, that number is probably going down a bit more as well. But then there's only like kind of one way up from there. And we will definitely then keep a close eye on this and support our companies here as much as we can to be able to then kind of get back to the hockey stick kind of shape there as well. And hopefully then at least we're very positive in terms of how we feel the community is feeling here that this tide will turn now as well. And again, in terms of the highest revenues of all time, so this is again as well very alumni focused, obviously, as typically when companies are able to be here for 3 years, that's actually it's a long enough time to actually take advantage of this community. But then of course for the companies, when they grow bigger, then it's time for them to also kind of free up space here for those new smaller companies, and then fly on their own to wherever they then want to leave from here. But we see that here, for example, there's quite nice examples from gaming perspective, from AI perspective, and so forth. But all right, this was a quick overview to what we were able to kind of distinguish from last year. It was very, very exciting to dig into the data and really also speculate and assess the data in the sense that kind of like what are the key takeaways that we were able to dig in from there. But I think overall, what we really feel is that there is this sort of a new surge coming up in the sense that we have more startups, we have also more experienced founders, we have people who've been working in their own professional fields for longer periods of time already, and then now they've come to the point in their lives where they feel that founding a startup is the right thing to do, and this is the perfect time to do that. And of course then, as I was saying, so in our community we are really striving to help them make the most out of it, really build their companies better, faster, help them grow, help them scale, and support them on their way to do that. But summing this up with that, so thank you very much on my behalf, and let's continue the discussion then with the panel and then with the next speaker. But thank you.
Thank you, Sarita. And that was a quick little dive into the numbers, but as Sarita mentioned, the little pamphlet or leaflet that you have on the table, there's a QR code, so you can scan that one and actually get straight into the report itself. So if you want to have a closer look, please feel free to do that. But next on stage, we have Marja-Leena Rinkineva, who is the Director of Economic Development and member of the Executive Board of the City of Helsinki. So let's also give her a warm welcome.
Thanks, and thanks, Sarita, for the quick view to the impact report. So I'm so happy to be here, and congratulations, Sarita, for those fantastic results again. I still remember the first time, the very first time I've been on this stage. That was 2015 on a gloomy November night when this place was really abundant. Hospital, there were like spider nets in the corners and leftover furniture, and the tunnel lamps were there still at that time, or where they were here. But otherwise, it was totally different space. And that night, that was the birth of Maria-01, when there were about 60 or 70 people from the startup ecosystem. I think Petteri was here then. I don't now see Petteri, but I think you were here at that time, and maybe Jarmo was here also that night when me and my team, we were on this very same stage asking the startup ecosystem that do you guys want this place? And I still remember I still get goosebumps from that, because I remember it so well, that the excitement and the enthusiasm that there would be a place for the Helsinki startup ecosystem, place of their own home, so to say, and that was the very beginning, and we really have come a long way from that. So congratulations for that, and also of course. It was the community that was already had been building there and was building up, and of course the city then was only the behind the scenes. It was our mayor at that time, Jussi Pajunen, and our CFO Tapio Korhonen and Tuula Saxholm, who were sort of a giving assistant that this whole hospital area was then given to Maria-01. The results that we just heard, they are amazing and they are impressive. I would say that Maria-01 has really fulfilled all the possible dreams that we had that November night and beyond. This place has really become all year round slush. That's how I describe it. And it really has become a landmark of Helsinki, and that's something that we can all really be proud of. Our role as a city is only a facilitator. It's a Maria spirit, it's the community, it's the team that make all of this happen, and we only say very much thank you to all of you for that. And of course, as we saw, the impact of Maria has been really growing and the numbers are impressive. And our aim as a city is really to help this growth to go on. We want to help the ecosystem to grow, and we will do everything that is possible in order to make sure that we see more and more success stories. The number of alumni is 10,000, and that's really, really important when we think about the like you said, Sarita, it's not only affecting the Helsinki area, but also nationally and internationally, and that's something that we can be really, really happy about. And also we saw the areas where the most of the startups come from, and I have to say that I'm especially really happy about those startups who are working in the areas where really working to solve the global challenges. We have very strongly stated in our strategy of the city that we want to be a place where we solve global challenges, and we are inviting everybody on board and work on that. And that's something that's also happening here in Maria. Maria-01's future is bright. This is always the place where I come to find inspiration and energy in order to carry on my own work to make Helsinki the very best business environment in the world. So thank you so much.
First of all, I wanted to ask you that, reflecting on your experiences and your observations, your kind of knowledge of the startup ecosystem, so how do the findings of the impact report sound to you? Maybe Petteri, you start there.
Yeah, can you? No. Hello. No. Okay, so I was actually surprised about. I didn't know that your community is already so big, like in terms of revenue and employees and everything. So I was positively surprised. Maybe you could make even more noise about that, since it's pretty impressive. The other thing was okay, it works. So I was sort of surprised that the total revenue of these early stage startups went down. But we've seen it with our companies as well. Like last year, companies that had grown 30%, 40% of a year, their revenue remained roughly the same. So they didn't grow at all, or some of them, the revenue decreased a bit. So no big surprises there. But it was interesting to see that what we see in our own portfolio can be seen with the small companies. But the good thing is that these things come and go. Like it doesn't really matter, like if the company can just survive whatever 18 months, 24 months, then it's a bull market again. I mean, there's nothing that has really changed. Like the trajectory is still up with startups, so don't get too worried about one or two slightly weaker years.
Yeah, I definitely agree on the noise part. You should be speaking more about this, and I agree with the last speaker that the numbers really are impressive. I really enjoyed looking at the list of different industries. I think that was an interesting insight into like what all is happening in this ecosystem. I think that's definitely something to look at for everyone else as well.
Yeah, I think wow. Okay, so how far do I need to keep this? For me personally, probably the biggest surprise was that the e-commerce and marketplaces were so big here. You know, second category after SaaS. And I think there's a couple of reasons behind that. So that was very interesting. And obviously, as a startup who's constantly raising funding, like the whole trend now is the most interesting thing. And I think it's all that the startups talk about right now is like, when is this gonna let up? When is it gonna get better? Like, is it gonna be summer, Q3, you know, all of this. And I think it's about to get better. I think it's gonna be really interesting to see the numbers next year. You know, what are the funding rounds and what is the revenue next year? So how are we now past it and are we heading into a boom? I fully agree with Petteri, like having seen multiple of these downturns, you know, I don't think it's going to last long. I don't think that this one is too bad. I think it's going to get better soon, probably after the summer. But it's still, you know, something that obviously for obvious reasons we follow very closely.
By the way, I have to add that I think this is my forecast. You can remind me early next year.
We'll quote you next year.
Yeah, but I think the total revenues of your companies will increase this year, not decrease. So let's just maybe 5%. That's my forecast. Let's see what happens. So
Care to make that interesting?
I'll be sure to note that down. So let's see then in a few years' time when we have the 24 revenues. But you, Pasi, you talked about the funding a bit already as well, and of course we saw from the report as well that the funding has gone down a bit, and of course it's been in the news as well that it is very challenging. Everybody knows that it is challenging for the startups to raise funding right now, especially those who are looking to raise some kind of further rounds, not only that just the pre-seeds or the seeds, and especially now that we will be seeing this year many companies that have raised in 2021, 2022 might be already starting to be a bit short on their runways. So how do you guys see it? That is there already light at the end of this funding tunnel, or how is the market going to behave this year?
yeah, it looks a bit better, and funnily startup market follows the public market, even though they are not it's not really relevant, but it happens for some strange reason. And now if you, like in the US, for example, the seed valuations are record high and Series A valuations are very low. So there's kind of a very weird situation going on. And I think here raising Series A is definitely more difficult than what it was a couple of years ago or 3 years ago. So it's hard. I think what the entrepreneurs need to do is to just face the reality that they may need to take a down round, or let's say the round can be an extension to the previous round, even though the company has developed a lot further. And this is mentally hard, but it just needs to be done. And some companies need to cut costs and so on to be more competitive in a sense, or safer for the investors. So it's just like the quicker the entrepreneurs adjust to the new reality, the better. And then things will change later, of course.
I agree on the kind of like adjusting to the situation. I think it's good to kind of like adjust to where we're right now and not plan for the fundraising market to get better, because we don't really know. And I think like what I've been hearing from VCs as well still is that it is hard if you are trying to raise a new VC fund, which obviously then relates also to the funding rounds for startups. If VCs can't get funding, then startups won't get funding either. So kind of like it's a pipeline that starts from there. When that gets better, then I think also the VC funding will come through there as well.
Yeah. Okay. So I'm not a VC despite the Patagonia vest. This is like my VC disguise. I'm actually concerned that I might get into trouble for impersonating a VC. But I have this feeling, and I don't know if Petteri agrees, that I have this feeling that the VC market follows the general debt market, like, because the interest rates are still as high as they have been. So my gut says to me that, as soon as the European Central Bank starts lowering the interest rates, which probably is going to happen by the summer, then more money is going to start flowing into the market. And by this time next year, we're not going to have this this discussion anymore. So that's my thinking. Like, we raised a round last year summer, and for sure it took much longer than we expected. We were lucky enough that we could raise, and we raised in very good terms, so I was really happy about that. But obviously we're going to need to raise again, sometime in the medium-term future, and I think it's going to be interesting to see how that goes. But my gut tells me that it's going to be easier than it was last year.
And I think that the companies with really solid numbers and a really solid track, they're still getting funded. So I think it is about kind of adjusting your numbers and making sure that you are adjusting to the situation, and actually keeping up your sales or things like that.
Yeah, and I think like 3 years ago, almost anything got funded eventually. So I think we are back to the basics. Like, if like the company needs to be VC fundable in a sense, like I would, let's say, use a rule of thumb that if it's not possible to get, let's say, to 100 million in revenues, if you don't have a plan for that, then you're raising a big seed round or an A round, then it can be very hard. And this was the practice years ago, like not just a fraction of companies were VC fundable, but it got super easy. So like way too easy for 3-4 years ago. So we back to the normal, I would say. We are not in any kind of depression at the moment, but this is like the long-term normal situation.
Thank you. Many reassuring words, and I really have to say that, kind of based on all the discussions that we hear here as well, that is really the feeling that there is still kind of money around as well, and it is possible to raise funding, but of course things are a bit more complex now than they maybe were. But talking about raising the VC funds as well, so Petteri, you launched your 5th fund last year. What more do you think that we here at Maria could be doing to help investors find these kind of companies to invest in and invest in the Maria companies?
Yeah, I think it's up to the companies themselves, like training them. Not about pitching, I don't think that's relevant, but I'm maybe of the minority here. I don't like the companies to pitch to us. I've seen too many sales pitches. I just like them to talk about their business like normal people talk with each other. But like they would need to know like what's really the potential investor space that they should target, and what are the sort of requirements for those investors. Like, it's that they don't target Sequoia in the seed round if the business is not good for them or optimal for them, and so on. And the other one is that maybe going to London, I think it's the center in Europe. Like, I think because the quality of the startups here is pretty good. Like, you could maybe partner with Atomico or some other company that has a nice office in London and just take the companies there to meet the local seed investors, like early stage investors. Even so, they seem to be visiting Maria quite often, but I think that could be one trick that could work.
Very interesting point. Thank you. Well, then to the other point that I mentioned before, that we have received a record amount of applications and a lot of companies wanting to be our members. So we were speculating that maybe there is this new sort of a wave of startups being founded right now, or exactly them looking for this community kind of for the additional support in these more difficult times. So how do you feel? Like, do you see that there are more startups being founded, or what could you think would be the reason why we have so many more companies now applying than before? Maybe Josefiina, if you can start.
Yeah, I think it's an interesting question. The data that I've seen so far does not point to actually more startups being founded. What I do see, like from personal experience, is that I feel like there are more kind of like ecosystem startups that are being founded. So people who have been in the ecosystem for a bit longer. They've been with like Slush or Aldo.es or something like that during the previous years, like maybe like 2020, 2021, and done something after that, and now they're kind of building their companies. And I feel like those are the people that kind of already know Maria01. So I think that might be something that's impacting the numbers that you see, where people who kind of already know about you are now building companies, which I feel is a very good group to also build companies, because they already understand the ecosystem, they understand how to build companies in this ecosystem.
How about you then, Pasi?
Yeah, I second that. Like there was a study done about like what age does a founder need to be when they're founding a startup to have the highest probability of an exit, and it was 46. Not to say that I'm that old, obviously not, but you know. But I think it's interesting that, you know, I think that, you know, we're at the stage where there's this second generation of like, you know, or this generation of people who've been around and, you know, who are doing their second startups. And for us, like, you know, we've been fortunate enough to have like a team of people who are very senior and who have, you know, been around, you know. So, you know, you can avoid a lot of the mistakes, and I think it's a bit easier. So perhaps that's some of it, you know, behind this growth curve.
Yeah, we made a record number of investments last year, which was 15. With 3 and now maybe 3.5, because Teemu Mattila joined us in the summer, 3.5 partners. And we feel really good about the quality of those companies, and we still see like high quality deal flow. So I think this is better than it was 3 years ago from our perspective. And of course, luckily we have slightly larger fund, so we can support the companies in the next round and the one after that. But I think the market looks pretty interesting, like more interesting today than it did when we were in the top of the bull market.
And why do you think that is, that right now it looks more interesting?
For some reason, I think even though, you know, the financing market has certainly gone down and it's a bit more difficult, but I think the ambition level of the startups and the quality of the founders, I mean, some of them are more experienced, some of them are younger, but I think the quality has increased, or it keeps increasing all the time. So the average quality, and they've already seen so many like unicorn examples or very valuable companies that the ambition level is also higher. It's just how the ecosystem develops.
Yeah, could it be that, you know, we're kind of like past the first wave of the startup hype and the startup bubble, and now we're into kind of like the serious startup business, you know, so it's getting like more professional and more, you know, controlled.
Yeah, I think that's a quite a good theory. Like last year, you didn't start a company just because you were interested in becoming an entrepreneur. You needed to have a better reason for that.
And do you think that then also kind of has to do with the founders' backgrounds, that kind of what have they done before? You talked about, Josefiina, the ecosystem builders here, but have you seen a lot more of these founders who, for example, have more professional background behind them, certainly more startups maybe behind them as well, but especially then kind of more career behind them already? Or how does it look to you?
I don't think I've like... Yeah, I think there are more, but I'm not sure if it's like actually something that like shows significantly in the statistics. But yeah, I do feel like it's something that's more of an option, and I think it's partly also because of companies like I feel like Smartly has been a company that has always kind of encouraged their employees to also start their own companies if they feel like it. So these bigger scale-ups also kind of encouraging their employees or team members, early team members, if they get bored, to start something of their own.
Yeah, and also like people in large corporations, like, you have people in corporations who are starting their like, startup-like ecosystems within the company and who are doing that. And then they realize that, okay, why am I doing this in large corporations? I could be doing this on my own or stuff like that. And then as Petteri mentioned, like there's been so many of these good examples, like in the non-gaming space. Like it used to be that in Finland that, you had the games companies, you had like the Supercells and everybody was, okay, so to be, to make it big in Finland, you need to do a games company. But then you had Volt, and you have Relex, and you have all these multi unicorns in completely other space, and people are like, oh my god, like you can make it big in any space in Finland, so it is possible. And I think those are great examples for anybody thinking about starting something new.
Yeah, we're getting these very ambitious deep tech startups like IQM, that's not our company, so, or Steady Energy, this small nuclear reactors and many others. And of course, ISI could be the one paving the way there and showing that these kind of companies can become successful. We've seen a lot of interesting stuff coming out from VTT and the universities, and there's even a new fund focused on that space. And then you can see these chain reactions like Volt that you mentioned, like they recruited a lot from these MBB companies, McKinsey, BCG, and Bain, and now we see founders from these companies, not like partner level people. I mean, I think they already lost. They too comfortable and wealthy, but younger consultants that have worked there 2-3 years have started companies, and these are pretty interesting companies, and it's really nice to work with these folks.
I think the talk about the industries is quite interesting in the sense that I feel at least that kind of looking at the startup ecosystem from here, it seems that there's quite a bit of fluctuation now and kind of different kinds of industries popping up. So we talked about the AI, of course, growing here as well. You mentioned the deep tech now. But what do you, Pasi, think about the e-com space? That why have we seen that growth? Is it just random that it has been growing, or do you feel from your experience that is there a reasoning why e-commerce and online platforms has been growing lately?
Yeah, sure. It's a very good question, but I think there is two obvious, like, huge megatrends in e-commerce. Like, one is that we are still in the middle of the offline to online retail shift, which is kind of like, going on for 30 years now, but still, like, global retail is like a $30 trillion business, and only 20% of that is online right now. And I think it could easily be 50-50. So, like, you could say that, okay, there's probably like $10 trillion of online commerce that still can be captured from that. But then from the startup angle, I think the even bigger megatrend is the rise of re-commerce, which is obviously a huge megatrend and with good reason. And re-commerce is not offline, it's mostly online. And it's still small. Like, for example, in clothes, it's only 1 or 2% out of the whole, fashion retail market. But it's growing 15 to 20x faster. And I think it's going to be huge. And I think it's going to be great that it is huge because, like, people need to do that more. So, we've seen a huge amount of, re-commerce marketplaces pop up. And I think it's going to be really interesting to see how that market plays out in the next 3 to 5 years.
How do you, Petteri, see that from your point of view?
Yeah, I fully agree with Pasi there that these are interesting opportunities. Another area that has sort of all of the sudden become feasible for startups is energy, and like, I wouldn't like to use the word climate tech because it's already somehow has been inflated, but like these sustainability companies, of course re-commerce is one area there, but you can now have pretty interesting business models that don't require like new regulation or carbon credits or anything like that. For example, in the electrification of everything, and there's plenty of interesting startups there, and it seems that the international tier one or top VCs that sometimes invested only or previously invested almost exclusively in software and services. I mean, now they looking at hardware and especially like, let's say, new battery technologies and energy technologies and these kind of areas where they were not active before. So it's kind of, it opens up new possibilities.
What do you, Josefiina, think? My next question would have been that, like, kind of, what do you see for this year? Do you see some trends apart from these that were mentioned? That where do we see growth in which industries?
Yeah, I think it's really hard to predict to the future. I do hope that people build companies that they actually feel passionate about and not just following the trends or what they think will be big. I think that's always the kind of best founder profile, where you're really kind of interested in solving a problem and that's kind of your motivation, not just becoming a founder. And I think that's what you mentioned earlier about, like, it's easier to kind of like fund these companies and now, since not everyone is getting funded and we're kind of back to basics, I feel it's even more important to actually build something that matters for you, and you are really kind of interested in that topic specifically.
Good, thank you. Another really interesting phenomenon that we've seen here lately as well is that there is all the time more both Finnish and international corporations and different actors on the private sector market that are interested in the startup ecosystem. So plenty of stock-listed companies, they nowadays have their startup units as well. They might even have certain goals for cooperation with startups and how they want to kind of also work together with the startups. So how do you view the role of corporate partnerships and corporations working together with startups, and how can that possibly drive growth within the startup ecosystem?
I would love to see bigger companies kind of like list themselves as companies who are willing to test new products. I think that's something that when I've been talking to very early stage founders, it's really tricky to get your first kind of like test customers, get your first people who are actually willing to give you feedback on the product, they're willing to test it, and we don't really have much of an ecosystem there. So getting these bigger companies, giving them getting a list from them of like, these people are willing to kind of like be your test subjects for these kind of things, that would be really helpful to the early stage community, in my opinion.
What do you think about that, Pasi?
I would agree. Like, I was a corporate guy before, couldn't hack it. Like, it started eating my soul. So like, I agree that, if it was somehow possible to convince larger corporations to partner more easily with startups, I think it would be great. As somebody who's worked in a very large company for 3 years, like, I do know that it's very hard. It's hard to get that mentality of like, okay, we'll just try this out, because there's 8 layers of management trying to not do anything, so like I'm not even exaggerating much, but so like, I think that's the challenge. Having said that, I was at Posti for 3 years and we had a thing where, we had this internal accelerator and all of that. I think there's hope in that. I think the biggest challenge for large corporations is that how do you actually turn that into like a startup-ish thing? Like, I think larger corporations have a hard time letting go of the business, like actually like founding a subsidiary, which could be funded by like a third party. I think that's extremely rare, and I think that should be happening more often. Is it VC fundable? Perhaps not if it's owned, by large corporations, but it could be that, the things that, are born in large corporations could survive better as their own entities. And I think that's another thing that could be like more spin-offs from large companies.
Interesting. And how do you, Petteri, see that from your portfolio companies? Have they partnered up with corporations a lot, or have you seen any great examples there?
Not that much, actually, even though I've been involved with larger companies. I think there are 2 challenges. Pasi and Jose already mentioned a few of those, but there's also the thing that startups don't understand, and they don't the big corporations, like what moves the needle there. Like let's say you would partner with UPM, Kymmene or Elisa or something like that, and you think that, okay, we can make 50 million in revenue, and because of the partnership you can get 10% of that, like 5 million a year more. I mean, it wouldn't matter at all. Like it wouldn't be a CEO level thing, and if there's a lot of hassle, it's just irrelevant, even though it would sound like great revenue for the startup. But if you could increase Elisa's average revenue per user 5%, that could create hundreds of millions of value at Elisa, and that would be a CEO level thing. So just like really understanding what makes a difference in these companies is super important. We see some examples with more mature companies like Volt partnering with Kesko, for example. That's really strategic for both companies. But for smaller ones, it's very, very tricky.
Interesting. That's very interesting, because of course then that's something that we are trying to crack here as well, that are there ways and are we able to find ways together with our partners as well to partner with the startups. But before we head to the audience Q&A and engage you guys there as well, so I have one last question to you. So looking to the future, we of course know that the Startup Foundation has this amazing goal that you guys would like to see 100 companies in Finland with revenues exceeding 100 million euros by 2050. And I know that you've been looking into the different bottlenecks and the enablers that might help or then block this from happening. So now as we talk in the context of Maria01, so what do you think what are the things that we here in our community could do to help make this happen?
I'm really excited and looking forward to the expansion plans. I think that is one thing. We do need more space for companies. One other topic that we've been talking a lot about in the kind of like bottleneck discussions is how do we get more people from abroad to found companies in Finland. And I think this is definitely a space where you could build that community where this would be the kind of like the hotspot of individuals moving from other countries to start their companies here. I think this is a great ecosystem to do that. And in general, I feel like one other kind of way to get more international talent here is people actually coming here to study and then maybe getting them into the ecosystem as well, perhaps even earlier on and engaging them with the Maria01 ecosystem.
Perfect. And we are actually getting a lot of these international delegations here as well. So hopefully these will then also help the different people coming here. But Pasi, as you're a member of the community, so how do you feel about this? That what's kind of from your point of view, from your company's point of view, from what you know from the community, so what do you think there could be that we could do?
Well, from a startup perspective, it's really simple. We need, in this order, we need more money and more people. So, like anything you can do to help those. I think that, but to be serious, like I think that Maria01 could be kind of like this face, like a marketing engine for this whole startup scene. Like Slush is obviously the kind of like the pinnacle of that, but Slush is only once a year. Maria01 is here physically all the time. So I think that, anything that you could do to raise the profile of Finnish startups, with investors, and also like anything to lure people from abroad to Finland, like I think it could be great. Like, anything you could kind of like to do that would be fantastic. And I think you're already doing a great job at this whole thing. Like we really love being here. I think it's a natural thing. And it kind of like, we could move to Keilaniemi, but I think it would be insanely boring. Like, we could be there, like, we'd be all alone there. Like, there would be nobody to talk to at lunch. And, there's only like one barber shop and, one Fatser cafe. And, there's action. But I think, that could be something. And I'm serious about money and people. That's it. The rest we can take care of.
This is a detail, maybe like a very small idea, but I don't know if you already have it, but like when investors visit Helsinki, like they usually just travel between the offices and it's Uber barely works and so on. So it's not super easy. Like if you would have like a space where the at least international VCs could work for free, I think, just to remove any friction there while they're here, and then they could efficiently have meetings, like if everybody would just meet them there here, as opposed to they just going around the city. And then we could refer to all the investors that are coming that, hey, just contact somebody at Maria, and you know, that's the place where you should be, and you know, that's the most efficient way to meet companies and so on. I mean, something like this, even though it sounds small, could kind of help you in becoming even more the de facto location and brings like critical mass around things that you're doing here.
Great tip. We'll definitely look into that. But thank you. And before I let you say your closing words, so now first, if we have any questions from the audience. I think somebody's running with the mic.
Hi. Thank you so much for the speech, for the great presentations and discussion. My name is Anastasia Koptsu from the N2 unit, entrepreneurship unit at Aalto University, from the research side. I had a question of your opinion about startup building as a service. So maybe you have seen this experience of this trend, at least in Europe, of these corporate labs or these startup labs or companies like Build, that their basic like mission is to create companies for others who pay them. So not necessarily within an established corporation, not an incubator or an accelerator, but more like a project, like a service that is being bought. What do you think about this type of projects or this type of companies that build companies for others, where the employees are the ones who are ideating, validating, starting it up, and then transferring to the client who has bought this kind of startup? Have you seen it in Finland, or how is it going? Thanks.
Yeah, very good question. I'll kind of like go back to my previous point of, I really think the best founders are the one who are building something that they really, really care about. So I think that needs to be there. I think it can work if you find the person who's actually gonna then build it that is really interested in the idea. They're passionate about solving a problem that the idea kind of relates to. But I think that's the kind of like issue there. If you're just kind of picking an idea to become an entrepreneur, then I think it can be a little bit tricky in terms of the motivation.
Yeah, I'm not a big fan of these places. I think, like places like Kiwas have a role where they just encourage people to get started, and they have some basic training and so on. But like I feel that I can barely advise startups, and like at least 40% of the advice is wrong. And I say that to the entrepreneurs, and then there are a lot of people who have much less experience and who've never seen or worked at a successful startup, and they are kind of advising companies with like a lot of certainty. I don't think it makes sense. And then there's even the reverse selection thing that I think like sometimes the companies that want these kind of services, like, hey, can you build a product for us because we don't have a technical founder and so on. So there's a reverse selection even. So that's like a vicious circle. Like Y Combinator is almost the only like super successful accelerator, and it's based on the fact that if you only take like 2% of the best entrepreneurs, it doesn't really matter what you do with them. I mean, many of them will succeed.
Yeah, one thing that I could think could be interesting on a lower level than the kind of like the product building level would be kind of like all the operational stuff. Like we're in this Finnish startup community thing, and we have this WhatsApp channel where people every day ask about something operational. It's always like, how do I build an option program that doesn't have negative tax implications? And how do I hire my first remote employees? And do you have accounting companies that you could recommend? And what about lawyers? And there's all this stuff, because like the actual founding of the company takes like an hour, but then immediately you realize that there's all this stuff, and some of it is insanely complex. And I don't know whether it should be a company. I've actually been thinking that if I had the time, I would start some kind of startup wiki, where people could collect all of their experiences from this stuff, like how to set up a startup in Finland, what are the rules of Business Finland funding? How do you do the hourly reports so that they actually get accepted? Like, I'm not sure how many of you have experience with that, but it can be hard. So I don't know, perhaps that's something, on a, the nitty-gritty day-to-day level.
Yeah, I kind of agree, because you could save time, but this is not like if you advise the startups or you have a list of like accounting companies that have been found to be good, or law firms that can be recommended. I mean, that's there you are most you're more likely to be right than if you say that this is your product strategy or this is how you should build the company.
Yeah, I also very strongly believe in the ownership of the company, not only kind of like actually owning the company, but like taking ownership of the actual work. I know that we, for example, here, we have a few of these companies that are doing, for example, the tech part outsourced for other companies. And in some cases that might work if the founders have a very good idea, but they just don't have the skills, for example, to hire the technical founder or a CTO, that could work. But essentially, I really feel kind of having been in startups before as well, is that it's really, really relevant for kind of the founders to be very hands-on and understand what's going on. But I do agree that exactly those connections and the recommendations, that's something that is highly valuable. And that's, of course, something that we, for example, here are aiming at doing, in the sense that our community shares a lot of that information, most likely in the same way as you guys do in the WhatsApp chat as well. In the sense that when we have, for example, partners here, we're trying to validate them in the sense that whenever there is a partner, then our community could rely on them being already like pre-vetted, and those are the guys that you can trust. They give you the good deal, and they help you in the ways that you need help with. So hopefully then that helps forward. Any other questions?
Ted Apter, Suomen Economist. Where do you see the political world on the local, national, EU level could help the Finnish startup ecosystem to grow better? Where are the bottlenecks?
They could, like, maybe the one thing that they should do is to increase the competitiveness of the local market. There are some really big local markets, not that many, but let's say like what's terveydenhuolto in English, the healthcare. Yeah, that's why I'm not our healthcare investor. So healthcare is an example where that would be a multi-billion euro market where you could innovate, but we've had occasionally have startups. Now I think all of our healthcare startups are in the US or somewhere else, because the politicians, especially kokoomus politicians, they just protect they kind of pretty cheap to bribe by the lobbyist, and they've been able to increase regulation so that it's only Terveystalo and Mehiläinen and others who can work there, and it's super hard to innovate. So if somebody would really, and that would be good for the consumer, because competition, of course, lowers, and innovation lowers prices. It's like deflationary in a sense, but this is what none of the parties really understand. So it has been hard. I think that's the only thing. Otherwise, they should sort of stay out of the game.
I thought you were going to talk about immigration.
Oh yeah. Well, that's
yeah,
my brains protected themselves by.
But I'm just saying that not setting up barriers for immigration would be a good start. Instead doing everything to help immigration and not doing this idiotic 3-month thing or whatever. I think that's just growing exactly the wrong way.
And I think this is perhaps not for kind of like for you, but like what I mentioned on getting more international people studying here, I think that is really, really relevant, because those are people that they might go back to their home country after they studied here, but they're easier to get back here as well because they have that connection. They know what Finland's like. They probably liked it here. They have some friends. And a lot of that talent, when I've been talking with early stage founders, some of them move abroad. They go to SF to work in companies, and they have a lot of really good talent and really good kind of like knowledge there that we really would love to see back here in Finland. So getting more people interested and coming to study here, that would really, really make a difference.
And I'll maybe comment still from the European perspective in the sense that, like Petteri was mentioning, that many companies go to the US. So I think one of the challenges that at least I talk a lot about with people is that whenever a company is thinking of going abroad, Europe is really not a very easy market to enter in the sense that we have so many different countries with very different regulations. So actually here, if you want to do the market entries, you have to go kind of one by one, and the markets are very different. The countries have very different regulations. Whereas, for example, in the US, it's a huge market. And then once you're able to enter it, it's a lot easier to scale. So I think in the sense, I know that EU is already planning some sort of a project around this as well, and how to keep the companies in Europe as well, and grow the companies in Europe so that they wouldn't be sold to the US straight away. But that's something interesting that I at least personally am following quite a lot to see if we can make that easier in some way.
Hi, my name is Fred Anderson. I'm visiting from Gothenburg, current student at Chalmers School of Entrepreneurship. And Gothenburg is also a very innovative city, but I have come here to learn. So I'm curious to hear, what do you think has been the biggest facilitators or success factors over the last 20 years that have built the startup community that you have today?
I think it's when I founded my last startup, which was 2006, we suffered from the .com hangover, and even more here from the UMTS, like the telecoms hangover, because almost all the previous startups had something to do with mobile world, and we struggled just hiring anybody to work for our company here in Finland. Like, people here probably don't even remember. Maybe Pasi does, that there was this.
I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah, he was just a kid back then. But it's but it was super hard. Like, and I think, like, basically what changed everything was Aalto Entrepreneurship Society. When I returned I was abroad for a couple of years. When I returned in 2008, that was established, and then I went to their Facebook page, and they had like more than 5,000 members there, and I was like super surprised at how is this possible, like how can they have these many interested students as members. And then that actually started everything, like all the serial entrepreneurs and the few investors that we had back then, like, just gathered around that student community, and it was sort of a neutral place to get started. So that it kind of, I think, started almost everything here. And then the other thing was maybe that the serial entrepreneurs founded companies, but I think the student community was like way more important.
Yeah, and I do remember what he's talking about, to be honest. Like, I set up my first company in 96, like the word startup didn't exist. But like, I agree with about Aalto ES and the startup sauna. I coached there for 8 years. Like, I thought it was, huge fun. I thought it was fantastic. And it was insane to visit these European cities. And once we were in Shanghai and Tokyo, interviewing all these companies who competed off the chance to come to Finland, to this weather, so like, I thought that was amazing. I still think that, that and Slush, obviously. I think Slush was kind of like the cherry on the cake. It was like what brought us the limelight of, like, the banner where it says that, that nobody in their right mind comes to Finland in November except you badass, welcome. Like, I thought that was fantastic. So I think those two things. I think the Aalto ES could be copied elsewhere. I think Slush is going to be harder to copy. But I also think Marja has done a great job. I think this has been really good as well.
Yeah, okay. I have a question for you. You, Pasi, mentioned that you need what should be here more is more money and more people. We can't bring you any money from the city for sure. No.
Not even a little.
No, not even little. No, absolutely no. But we are working on how to attract more people to come to Helsinki, and our company Helsinki Partners, Clarissa, is here. They are working hard on that, and of course we are also working on how to make people stay. Like we have the spouse programs and so on, so that people who move here that they would have good life here in Helsinki. But what else city could do for the startup ecosystem, or is there anything, or should we just lay back and do nothing, or what could we do? So this is an open invitation for you and of course for the whole arena here to tell us what we should be doing more or what we should be doing less.
Yeah, there's still the same problem that there were some positive development, which is the English-speaking school part of the equation. Like when people who have kids move here, especially like older kids, they should get places in English-speaking classes. And I think the city has created more places, but I just read that they are, and we are to blame as well because our kids were in those classes as well. But they've been filled by the Finnish families, so there should be a system where we would. It's a super simple but important thing. We should have a system where they would automatically get places for the kids, because you can't really move to a different country if your children don't get to school or they really struggle there. So that's a very practical and important thing that should be fixed.
Completely agree on that, and I've been hearing the same issue from companies, but also getting the Maria 01 expansion. I think that's definitely something that you can drive from the city side as well and get kind of like a push to help Maria on that topic. Another thing is that I think there could be something done to get more people from abroad to start their companies here. I don't know, something like a startup package for starting here, getting some help if you decide to start your company in Helsinki. Perhaps like working with Maria 01 on building something that would help to get started, help to kind of like move here as an entrepreneur. You do get help if you get hired to a scale up, because they obviously have a team who helps you. But then if you want to move here to actually found your company, do you get that support from the city?
Hello, my name is Tai, and I'm from Auto Stop Centers. Currently, I just joined the team 1 week ago. But maybe if I could like add some comment on this perspective, since my background is like foreigners who study and graduate and now live and work in Finland, so I have more relevant background. Looking at the Finnish startup ecosystem here, I would say that I'm really proud of what we have been achieving so far. For example, like I involved in Startup Sauna actively last year, and the community are super welcoming. Everyone are really entrepreneurial mindset and welcoming everyone. But back to Bobby, the concept of slots, and let's say slots and junction, has been expanded globally, quite impressive. Last year's like Slush has 20 more Slush D around the world, and Junctions has more than 10. Every year we brought a lot of international talents and foreigners come to Finland, but I'm still very struggling how to understand here what is the connections between the Finnish startup ecosystem and the public bodies playing a big role in it. Last year I had a very good or amazing opportunity to went with Business Finland to Vietnam to promote work in Finland, work in Helsinki or work in Espoo project. I got most of the questions from people was that, why would I choose Finland to have my company, considering the restrictions is quite significant, play a significant role, and considering if just put on the table that people mentioning Canada, they don't even have to be there, but the resident permit can be much easier to obtain, and people have more support ecosystem to be like build their startup. And from my perspective, I see the startup ecosystem here doing a really great job. But then on the other side, let's say international student, they graduate here, when they are struggling about the financials and they don't get a job, the sort of like one of the thing they don't want to hear about is starting a company, when they don't have clear visions how to secure their financial aspect, how to build a company more sustainable and in a longer term. So I'm really also looking forward to see more actions can be done from the city side as well, or the government side, to more like balance out the energies between the Finnish startup ecosystem and the government representative.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I think we should have like more people like you working for these organizations that really can have the direct connections with the sort of customers of the startup ecosystem and people who we would like to get here. Like we can only speculate what's important here.
Hi, you briefly touched on London being almost the hub for startups and financing, and how in Finland the quality of startups has been increasing. With the current political landscape in the UK, do you have any predictions for maybe the next hub for financing and startups in the next few years?
I don't know. I think it's like pretty independent of like Brexit didn't really change things that much. Maybe it changed in the banking sector and so on, but startups won't get loans from banks in any case, so it really doesn't matter. So I think London will still remain as the hub for investors, and mainly because of the really good US connection, like the US VC firms. Many of them have, an increasing number of them have offices now in the UK, and they've actually created this even after Brexit. Like, let's say IVP, who invested in Supercell and Ivan and Supermetrics, they've had like for 9 months or a year, they have an office there, and Sequoia now has an office in the UK and so on. So I think it won't change. There are places like Berlin and Geneva, but I don't see that they'll become comparable to London in the next 5 to 10 years.
Yeah, like perhaps this is a special case, but I'm not sure if I fully agree. Like, I think London is gonna remain the number one place, but like we're regulated. We're a regulated financial institution, and we talk a lot with UK VCs, and they're always confused when I show them the list of countries where we plan to expand to, and the UK is like number 16 or 17. And they're all like why? why not UK? And I'm like, Brexit. We need to apply for a separate license. It's basically the same amount of work as if we went to the US. So for the fintech space, UK is like a no-go zone. So like you just don't do that. You do all of Europe first, all the 30 countries, and then you might consider going to the UK. So at least from that perspective, like Brexit has had a huge negative impact on the UK.
Yeah, for a fund it's a bit different since they are not usually incorporated in the UK. So they'll either in Luxembourg or Jersey or Cayman Islands or something like that, just because of the tax treaties that they have around the world is much like we can't really get US money to our fund because of the Finnish kommandiittiyhtiö, the structure doesn't really allow it. So our next fund, if we need to raise abroad, needs to be in Luxembourg or somewhere else, which is one of the things politicians could really improve, but they've already known it for 20 years. Nothing has happened, but but that's why the investors can live wherever they like, and then the fund is somewhere else.
And we would have time for one last question. I think I saw a yes.
Thank you, everyone, and thank you for your questions stressed about the international immigrants. And I'm Shuwei, have lived in Finland 24 years. Helped a Finnish company go to China, for the first 10 years and then being entrepreneur by myself, promoting Finnish education in China. So now I finally come back, and I want to say that, as you mentioned, what we can do to help Finland, because I have lived in US, in UK, globally 36 countries I've been visiting, but all in all, I came back to Finland. I don't know why. And today I have this idea is that I am super happy. I just talked with the lady I just met from Scotland. She was a little bit concerned about the weather, as even some Finns are. But I just enjoy the winter as well, because you can do sports. You find the way how to leverage everything what you have around, and also I give a tip to her, like she said that how I live in the winter time or summertime. I said go walk in the forest. That is also the one thing Finnish people are so happy. So all in all, what I want to stress is that Finland, should we think of like a branding for ourselves? Nokia was there, make Finland famous. Where is the next branding? So the happiness, and this happiness is such a unique. It's a society, environment, business surroundings, and the people mindset and the nature around. So by being that, we can bring this, as you mentioned, the venture capitalist. So have a happiness, the venture capital spot hots, like business tourism, not only the normal tourism, but business tourism. And one of those right now I'm facing is that in July this year, I'm going to bring 20 investors from China to here, but I'm suffering a little bit because there's no people I can meet. So they are looking for, because that's a time the kids only have time, because a lot of them, they're also looking for schools, for like meeting, like what it is look like. But then it's perfect time for Finns has the happiness moments. So in that way, that the facility, the package what you mentioned is really, really important. When I tried to bring last year one of my friends to be an investor here or start up their own company, they just stuck by this regulation of the visas and how complicated the process and everything. So I think that is branding is one thing, and how to build e-commerce or whatever, this kind of platform, make more people know about this happiness thing, sell the happiness recipes there, and bring the path very easy. Because a lot of international talents, they come to a country, the education for kids is so important. If that is there, like make me so easy, I will go. Finland, the other way, there's not too much barrier for international people, whether, can find solutions, but how to make this first step easy. Yeah.
Thank you. I think happiness is a very good way to start wrapping things up. Clarissa, did you have a comment still?
I just wanted to tell you that this week starts an international campaign about happiness and the happiness hacks of Helsinki and Finland. You probably won't see it because it's targeted outside of Finland, but I will be happy to send you some links and you can share them.
Can you share the hacks? We want to know.
Perfect. So now, wrapping things up, thank you for the great conversation. My last question to the panelists still would be that, a bit like a rapid fire question, if you could give 1 or 2 tips to the startups for this year, what would your tips be?
I would say that aim high, even though the times are depressing. Think about the 100 million revenue and how you get there, like build a real business.
Yeah, I kind of need to encourage everyone to the 100 million revenues as well, since that's our target. So we really need more companies who get there. So please do it for all of us.
Yeah, and I'll second kind of like what Petteri said before, that don't worry about what is hot right now. Like, don't do something .ai just because you think that, because that's over already. Like, don't worry about the trends. Worry about getting the best possible idea and worry about doing something unique, which nobody has done before.
Thank you. Great tips and great comments. And thank you everyone for joining us here this morning.